And welcome back, footy fans. It's another episode of Donnie's Disposals. I am your host, Coach Donnie Hess, here, back with another VFL Vantage show, reviewing the last around month of the VFL. A few things have happened. We're a little bit behind, but a lot of things to discuss. Joining me, as always, my VFL expert from Victoria, Australia, Melbourne, all around in that area, Mr. Brendan Rhodes. Brendan, how are you, sir? Sorry for the slip up. It's getting late in the evening. It's been a long night. As we were talking off air, we were both up watching the Swans last night for you, very early for me. So pardon me if I'm a little off.
Well, we've got every reason to be a little bit off after the way, and I will say the way we did it again, dominated a game against an inferior opposition and found a way to throw it away. It's just been one of those years, unfortunately, for the Swans. It looks like it's all over now, so we'll just keep developing. We'll keep cracking in like we always do, and look out next year.
Well, as we said, the kind of the silver lining maybe is a few more points there to get a couple of academy kids. So I'm going to try to find some positive lights on that. But we are here to talk VFL football, and a lot has happened since the last time we talked. We have 5 rounds of men's, 5 rounds of women's, and the finals are coming up in the women's. So we will talk everything on the women's final matchups coming up here in just a little bit. But before we get into that, the VFL and the VFLW that you have seen over these last few rounds since the last time we talked, sir, what's your thought processes on that? How things have changed really quickly? How has the footy been going in Victoria?
Well, it's been absolutely fantastic, actually, and things have tightened up a little bit. Last time we spoke, the Brisbane Lions and the Gold Coast Suns were flying out in front of the competition. While they're still in the top 2 positions on the ladder, the Lions have now dropped 2.5 games out of their past 4. So they're, after being undefeated through the first 9, they're now 10-2-1. They've slipped to second spot on the ladder, and one more loss will cost them a spot in the top 2 because Werribee is absolutely flying, which we'll talk about very shortly. The Gold Coast Suns, still a very good team, but they had a shock loss last week after the siren to an Essendon team that had lost 9 matches in a row. So that does open the door a little bit for teams like Werribee, Box Hill and the Casey Demons. And there's really very, very little between, I would say between 7th or 8th spot on the ladder, right down to 14th, with 4 spots on the line. It's going to be a tight finish. Maybe not as tight as the women, but very tight nonetheless.
Definitely, for sure. So let's jump into the men, and then we will crash into the women's ending of their home and away and how it all worked out. So jumping to the men's, jumping again back to round 11, we're going to really quick review this. Going back Friday, June 2nd, start of round 11 sees a great game between Southport and Casey, as Casey get the 1-point win on the road at Southport. Gold Coast with a smashing of Port Melbourne, 115-51. Werribee, as you said, finding their groove with a 60-point win over Coburg, 97-37. Carlton edge out the Dolphins, 76-73. Williamstown starting to play some better footy up and get the win over Box Hill, 76-61. The Footscray Bulldogs knock off the Cats, 108-50. The Tigers survive a tough game against GWS with a goal after the siren, 82-80. The North Melbourne Roos beat Essendon 80-69, and Collingwood give a nice little smashing to the Northern Bull Ants, 115-64. I want to go to it, sir. A couple of crackers decided by less than a goal. Casey Demons finds a way to get a win at Southport, which kind of starts Southport on a little bit of a slide.
It did a little bit, and the Demons, well, they were a little bit off colour there for a couple of weeks. They slipped out of the top 6 at one stage. They're back in there now, of course, but this was an interesting one where Southport, they sat behind for most of the day. Casey seemed to have control, but when Southport makes a late run, they usually win the game. They kicked 2 goals very late on. They got the lead with around about 5 or 6 minutes to go. but they couldn't hold out the Demons. And Josh Shackey kicked a goal in the 24th minute, basically right on the siren to get the Demons home. And the sliding doors of that is that Casey are now sitting in 5th spot on the ladder, 9 wins and 4 losses, and Southport are down in 13th at 6 and 7. Whereas if the Sharks had won that game, even though it's a month ago, it turns things completely around. The Demons drop 2 spots and the Sharks go up with their strong percentage. They'd be up in 8th. So it's amazing what 1 point can do. And they seem to be a little bit off Southport this year. We're just waiting, as I told you off air, we're just waiting for them to wake up and go on a run. It hasn't quite happened yet. But they're too good a team not to have that burst at some stage. They'll be back.
Definitely. And then I know, if I remember correctly, Richmond got the goal after the siren in that game against GWS with one of the debuting guys for Richmond last night. I think it was Bowers, ended out kicking the game-winning goal there. So 3 games decided by under a goal. Another fascinating round of footy. Will jump to round 12. Starting off with another cracker is the Sydney Swans edge out Sandringham 79-76. Box Hill knock off the Lions 109-90. Southport get a win with a bounce back win 91-67. Footscray knock off the Frankston Dolphins 181. Williamstown smash the Bullants 108-33. North Melbourne beats GWS 96-44. Werribee continuing its strong run with a 45-point win over Richmond 82-37. Collingwood hide the Casey Demons 73-59, and Carlton with a 99-68 win over the Bombers. So a cracking game. I mean, Box Hill getting the win over the Brisbane Lions. I mean, the way the Lions were going there for a bit, this is a little bit of a shocker.
It was plenty to talk about. There was in round 12. That was, of course, on the Saturday. That was the Lions' first loss of the season to the Box Hill Hawks at Box Hill. It was one where I gave the Hawks a chance, but didn't actually go ahead and tip them. And Fergus Green kicked 5 goals straight after being a little bit off. That got him back in the Hawks AFL team. And it sort of started Brisbane on a little bit of a downward run, where, as I said, they've now lost 2 and drawn 1 of their past 4 games to open the top 2 up to the chasing pack, which includes Box Hill sitting in 4th. So that was a wonderful performance, and one which they had complete control over for the entire game. Now, that happened, Brisbane losing their first game of the season. That happened 24 hours after Sydney won their first game of the season.
Mm-hmm.
As you mentioned, the Swans were 0-9 before that game, and they held on to beat Sandringham, a fast-finishing Sandringham. Jack Buller, who was the pick in the mid-season draft, came in, kicked 5 goals on debut for the Swans and got them over the line. So that was absolutely fantastic to get Sydney underway. And then later on the Saturday, we saw Ben Jolly from Williamstown, the absolute legend of the game. He played his 300th VFL game on that day. I think we brought it up last time to tell you how big of an achievement that was for Ben Jolly. The second most experienced player in the competition is Tom Wilson from Collingwood, who played his 150th game about 2 weeks later, so a couple of weeks ago. So he's played twice as many games as anybody else still active in the competition. Tomorrow he plays game number 302, which equals the all-time record. There's only 3 players who've made 300 in this competition. So that win over the Northern Bullants was a big one for Williamstown. Unfortunately, the Gulls haven't won since.
Unfortunately, we'll jump to round 13 as a cracking game to start off the round, as Geelong just barely edge out Frankston 72-70. Brisbane Lions absolutely smashed the Swans 142-31. The GWS Giants get a big win over Southport 128-79. Richmond beat Sandringham 87-55. Werribee a little bit closer than they probably wanted, but get the 4 points nonetheless, 76-70 over Carlton. Footscray with a 30-point win over the said Seagulls. Gold Coast with an absolute cracking game over Northern Bullets 146-24, and Coburg fall to the North Melbourne Roos 95-65. So little bit more lopsided games there. But I mean, the first one, absolute cracker, is Frankston just barely fall short to the Cats.
Yeah, really unlucky. The Dolphins, they can't seem to take a trick. You mentioned back in round 11, they led basically the whole game and lost by 3 points to Carlton at Carlton. This time they trailed all day to Geelong, but came charging back home. Actually got the lead late on, but then couldn't hang on and got beaten basically in the dying stages by a goal and then a behind. So I reckon Frankston, even though they got thrashed last week, which we'll get to shortly, they're a much better team than their 3-9 record would suggest. The Lions, after their first loss, the Swans, after their first win, that was a massive crash back to earth for Sydney. No question about that. Werribee showed their class. Sean Mannock kicked 2 goals in basically the last 3 minutes to take them from a goal down to a goal up against the Blues. Gold Coast, as you said, flex their muscles. And Coburg, the winless Lions are improving. They're playing 3 pretty good quarters of football at the moment. They just can't quite finish their games off, but I think there could be a win on the way for them soon.
Definitely. We really hope so. Just to give some confidence to the Lions. So we move to round 14, which if I see correctly is another one of those shortened rounds with not as many teams playing. So we start off KC with a 40-point win over Geelong, 80-40. Collingwood smash Sydney 94-71. The draw, as you had said, a half game as Sandringham and Brisbane play to a 79-79 draw. Southport get the win over Coburg, but Coburg competitive for a team at the bottom of the ladder, only losing by 40 to the Southport Sharks 102-62. Gold Coast continuing their high scoring ways, beating Box Hill by 64 149-85, and Port Melbourne get a win over Essendon 91-38. I mean, a draw for a Brisbane Lions team that I think a lot of people were looking at as being kind of the head and shoulders above some. A draw with Sandringham really had to take a lot of air out of the sails, especially after a couple of losses as well.
And it was a game that they actually escaped with the draw in. At the 27-minute mark of the third quarter, Sandringham led by 24 points, and they were in control, the Zebras. They were about 4 goals up for most of the second half, but the Lions, they came charging home with the wind in the last quarter. They had the last 8 scores of the match and kicked, what did they kick there? 3 goals, 5 to come from 23 points down to get that draw. Callum Archie kicking a goal in the 30th minute of the final quarter to save them 2 points when they probably didn't deserve them. This was a round where the lower ranked teams did pretty well. Collingwood beat Sydney, as you said, by 23 points, but there was only a goal in it into time on of the last quarter. The Magpies kicking 3 late ones just to edge away. And Coburg was actually 10 points in front of Southport just before 3-quarter time in that game. And the Sharks kicked the last 9 goals of the game to run out with that comfortable win in the end. And so, yeah, things just starting to take shape there. I did the Geelong Casey game on the Friday night, and that was where I really thought Casey woke up. The signs were there that the Demons are almost back to the form that saw them only lose 1 game in 2022, and they're going to be very, very dangerous on the run home.
It'll definitely be interesting to see how that goes, especially with the injury to Bailey Fritch up in the AFL, to see kind of how does that affect them going forward. So we jump to the last round that has fully played. So we won't talk about round 16. There was actually a game this morning, but we won't talk about that. We'll stay in round 15 as Richmond just barely edge out the Lions 59-58. We'll definitely talk about this one a little bit later. Geelong also getting the escape by 8 over Sydney 77-69. Werribee with an absolute smashing of Sandringham 141-65. Carlton says I can do just as well, beating the Northern Bullets 125-40. Box Hill with a nice win over Port Melbourne 83-60. Footscray Bulldogs beat the Coburg Lions. Again, the Lions still staying competitive, only losing by 32, 108-76. Collingwood absolutely thrashed the Dolphins 126-31. Casey, as you said, maybe finding their mojo with a nice 134-38 win over the Giants. North Melbourne beat the Seagulls of Williamstown 87-34. And Essendon with a 1-point thriller over the Gold Coast Suns 77-76. So 2 games in this round by 1 point. Both of the Queensland teams falling in this, kind of bringing them back to the pack here. Which one was more impressive? Richmond going to Brisbane and getting the 1-point win, or the Essendon Bombers getting the 1-point win at home over the Suns?
And they were both after the siren.
It's the way it seems to be going there, and especially in the VFL.
Absolutely unbelievable. I'm going to say that Essendon was the more impressive one, because Gold Coast has been averaging 119 points a game, 18 goals a game all year, and the Bombers kept them to 16 scores and 12 goals for in that game. I did that one on the Sunday, and Essendon was the better team for most of the game. Gold Coast headed them 3 times in the last quarter, and Essendon came again on each occasion. And Anthony McDonald-Tipungwuti took a mark 35 metres out, straight in front, half a second before the siren, with scores level. All he had to do was score. He sprayed it for a behind. It makes better reading when you win by a point rather than when you win by a goal, doesn't it? But I
More
just couldn't
exciting.
believe how good a game that was and how good a game Essendon had played. As I said, they'd lost 9 games in a row before that, and Gold Coast had won 20 of their previous 22, and had basically taken all before them to get that win, was just unbelievable. On the Friday afternoon, Richmond and Brisbane Lions. You mentioned that Jacob Bauer kicked a goal after the siren to give Richmond a 2-point win over GWS at GWS in round 11.
Mm-hmm.
Well, he did it again.
Yep.
It was Jacob Bauer again after the siren with a goal from 45 metres out, set shot to take Richmond from 5 points down to 1 point in front and give them that unbelievable victory over the Brisbane Lions. 99% of footballers, maybe 99.9% of footballers, will never kick a goal after the siren to win a game in their life. And he did it twice in 4 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, fortunately, that form got him his AFL debut this morning, your time, for Richmond.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, he ripped his hamstring with his second kick of the night and ended up out of the game, which was extremely unlucky for him. But yeah, he certainly got a good future as a very calm player under pressure, Jacob Bauer. Geelong beat Sydney by 8 points. Once again, there was a kick after the siren there for the Cats, so it was only 2 points the difference when the siren went. Braden Ham kicking a late one to get them 8 points to the good. And then there were the blowouts. Sean Manor, who I mentioned was the star against Carlton, he kicked 7 to beat Sandringham. Carlton had a good share of goal kickers as they flogged the Bull Ants, and Collingwood had Reef McInnes kick 6 in their win over Frankston. Casey, well, that was a terrible performance by GWS, saw them fall out of the top 10. And North Melbourne's win over Williamstown was just as impressive as any of the others. They actually took the Seagulls spot in the top 6 with that 53-point victory.
Awesome. So again, we've all caught up. Again, we had this morning's game between Richmond and Sydney. We'll discuss that during our tips. We'll cover it really quickly just because we can. But let's go to the women, because the women have played the final 4 rounds and have a finals set. So let's talk about how the final 4 rounds set the ladder and set this finals up to be absolute cracker. So we jump back again, round 11. back to June 2nd as Port Melbourne get a edge out the Western Bulldogs 36-32. The Southern Saints get a nice 6-point win over Carlton 38-32. The Williamstown Seagulls edge the Box Hill Hawks by 3, 29-26. Casey starting to kind of find their legs maybe a little bit with a 35-14 win over Geelong. Unfortunately, Darebin again take their flogging as Collingwood beat them 72-13. And North Melbourne with a nice little 8-point win on the road against Essendon 45-37. So a couple of cracking games to start the round. Southern Saints go on the both road teams with Port and the Southern Saints getting wins on the road.
Well, that win from the Southern Saints put them a game clear on top of the ladder with 3 games to actually one more in round 12. So we'll get to that one. They were on a 4-match. That was the third of a 4-match winning streak, all by around about a goal or less, which got them right up the table. So that was a great win over Carlton, which put the Blues finals hopes in jeopardy. We'll get to what ended up happening there. Williamstown, that was where they first really announced, even though they were winning games, that was where they first announced that they were a genuine finals chance with that win over Box Hill away. And North Melbourne, well, they looked like their season was cooked and was going to fall away. And beating Essendon at Essendon woke things up and kept them right in the mix right up until the last round.
Definitely. It's always interesting. I love seeing those nice, tight, close games. We'll jump to round 12 as Williamstown get the win over the Western Bulldogs by 25, 35-10. Carlton beat their old rivals 34-26 over the Collingwood Magpies. North Melbourne end the Saints winning streak 34-10. Essendon get a win at Casey 30-25 and a draw between Geelong and Box Hill at 27 apiece, and Port Melbourne giving Darebin what they usually do with a nice little 41-point win, 58-17. But a draw, another interesting result here as Geelong and Box Hill play evens 27 all.
Yeah, and Box Hill controlled that game all the way through, as you would expect, as one of the premiership contenders. Geelong was on the slide by this time. And in the end, it was the Hawks who probably blew 2 points. They saw Geelong come back and take the lead midway through the final quarter. Then the Hawks had 2 chances to win it back, missed them both to end up with a draw. 3 goals, 9 they kicked. Their kicking for goal has been terrible for most of the year, Box Hill, and that's why they finished 4th instead of top. They lost, I think, maybe 3 games. They had 2 draws that they lost, but they didn't win by kicking 3 goals, 9, plus a couple of others they threw away as well. So, and I think once we get to the finals, I think it'll end up costing them this week. So that was a very interesting one, their second draw of the year for the Hawks. North Melbourne, I was a week out with what I said about the Southern Saints. It was after round 11, as I was getting at originally. They were a game clear on top of the ladder. North Melbourne belted them on their home ground. That game was switched, so that was played at the Saints' home ground, even though North is listed as the home team.
Mm-hmm.
That was 10th beating first at that time by 24 points. And it started a downward spiral for the Saints, which we'll get to. And Carlton's win over Collingwood just woke up their finals chances.
Mm-hmm. So we'll move to round 13 again. Only 2 rounds left. We'll see how the results play out, how they affect the ladder as Carlton get the win over the Western Bulldogs by 29, 43-14. Box Hill also going to Casey and getting a 27-point win, 42-15. North Melbourne handing Darebin a nice little whooping, 57-8. Williamstown beating the Southern Saints, as you said, kind of their slide, 25-21. Collingwood smashing Geelong 43-3, and Port Melbourne just edging out the Essendon Bombers 22-19 with 2 games to go. Some cracking games, mostly upsets, but Williamstown with a nice little impressive road win over the Saints.
Yep, a great performance again. I think it was the first time they'd beaten the Southern Saints. Williamstown actually had to win their last 2 games against the Saints, who they'd never beaten, and Geelong in the last round, who they'd never beaten, just to make the finals. We'll get to round 14 shortly. They did the job against the Saints, and that sent them, as I said, 2 weeks earlier, a game clear on top. The Saints are now sitting 5th on the ladder with 1 round to go. That's how close it is. The win for Carlton, comfortable over the Bulldogs. Casey Demons bowed out of the finals race in round 12 against Essendon, and that sort of set things up. And then Geelong, they were fully on the slide as well with their big loss to Collingwood. So remember, after round 11, St Kilda and Geelong, Southern Saints and Geelong were the top 2 teams on the ladder. So we go into round 14, which you're about to talk about. Port Melbourne's narrow win over Essendon meant that they, who were, I think they were 7th after round 11, they went into round 14 on top of the ladder, needing only to win to get the minor premiership. Collingwood was sitting in 2nd. Williamstown was 3rd. Box Hill 4th. Southern Saints 5th. Geelong 6th. Essendon 7th. Carlton 8th. So I'm setting the scene here because the competition is that close that Port Melbourne only had to beat 10th place Casey to guarantee top spot. Collingwood only had to beat 9th place North Melbourne to guarantee a spot in the top 2. With 7th place Essendon taking on the second bottom Western Bulldogs and 8th place Carlton playing the bottom team Darebin, you knew that they were probably going to win, which meant that 3rd Williamstown versus 6th Geelong and 4th Box Hill versus 5th the Saints were elimination finals. So the losers of those games were going to miss out. So
and I'm sitting here looking at the results.
Let's see how it went.
so we'll go to it. As you said, the deciders, we start off, as you said, Williamstown v Geelong. Williamstown get the win by 14, 51-37. As you said, Carlton with a major win over Darebin, 81-14. Essendon edged the Western Bulldogs 41-28. The Southern Saints fall to the Box Hill Hawks 21-4. Collingwood beat North Melbourne 56-23, and Casey get a 10-point win over Port Melbourne. So I will pull it up really, really quickly just to help us out here. The VFL ladder after that insane final round sees the Southern Saints and Geelong just missed in 8th, 7th. Sees Carlton in 6th, Essendon in 5th, Box Hill in 4th, Williamstown in 3rd, Port Melbourne in 2nd, and Collingwood top the ladder to go into the finals, sir. What an insane round, knowing that you had 2 games that basically was you win and you're in, lose and you're out.
Pretty much, yeah. And it all went to plan on the Saturday. There were 5 games on the Saturday. Essendon and Carlton did what they were supposed to do, although Essendon was behind the Bulldogs just before 3/4 time. So that sort of raised some hopes with the game that was being played between Box Hill and the Southern Saints, which was the game that I was calling. So, but they got the job done, which meant they were in. That made the other 2 elimination finals. Williamstown had already done the job. So Geelong was history. The Southern Saints could not kick a goal in their last game of the season for the 2nd year in a row after they went goalless in last year's grand final. So amazingly, the 2 teams that were 1st and 2nd after round 11 missed the finals after round 14. Collingwood, 9 wins and 5 losses to finish on top. That is an amazingly low win tally to finish on top of the ladder. And North Melbourne with 7-7 finishing 9th, that's an amazingly high win tally to finish 9th.
Mm-hmm.
So they're only 2 games off top spot and they missed the finals by a game. Absolutely amazing stuff. But it set up a final series that is absolutely mouthwatering with 3 huge games on this weekend that are all different and all must-see TV.
Yep, and we will go over all of the finals kind of variations a little bit later, but we'll go quickly through a men's burning questions. We will preview the women's finals before we do the tip, and we will tip all of the finals. So, Brendan, you're gonna have to tell me how these finals go because unfortunately, with I don't have like the ladder things out, so I will have you explain that a little bit later. So, but we'll go to the burning questions for the men really quickly. Just a couple of quick teasers here. Gold Coast now tops the ladder in the men's competition. Can they stay on top with only 7 remaining? And if not, who's your team that you think will top the ladder once the regular home and away season is done?
I'm bringing up their run home that Gold Coast has coming up. They play Frankston at home this weekend, which you would expect them to win. GWS in Canberra in round, they've got a bye, and then GWS in Canberra. Brisbane Lions, Sydney, and Carlton to finish. I would expect that they will win at least 3 of those 5 games that they've got left. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They'll win at least 3. So that should guarantee them a top 2 spot at least. If they can beat the Gold Coast, if they can beat GWS in Canberra in round 18, yes, I think they'll still finish on top of the ladder pretty safely, even with a loss to the Brisbane Lions in round 19. So I'm going to say yes, but the challenges are coming thick and fast. Werribee, which we'll talk about, they've won 9 games in a row now, sitting third on the ladder. You can never underestimate the Brisbane Lions. They'll get their form back shortly. The Box Hill Hawks are dangerous. I think the Casey Demons are really the team to watch, sitting there in 5th spot, and North Melbourne in 6th. They're on an absolute flyer as well. So any one of those top 6 are really genuine premiership chances. I'm not prepared to rule Williamstown in 7th out just yet, but they're going to need to get their mojo back pretty quickly.
Definitely. And then we'll kind of flip to the other side with 7 rounds left. Looking at this ladder, and I was just kind of taking a look at the number totals because technically there's only 2 games between 10th and 15th. So with 7 rounds left, how many teams do you think are still in the running for finals? Because I mean, points wise, I would say up to 15 potentially.
Yeah, points wise, definitely 15. I am going to say 14. I'm going to rule out Port Melbourne, who are sitting in 15th spot. They're going to need some upsets to make it happen. It's still potentially on their own bat. They've got 5 games to go. They play Werribee this weekend. If they can stop Werribee, who haven't actually won at Port Melbourne since 2015, so if they can stop Werribee, they are back in the mix. They play Carlton away in round 18. They should beat Coburg. Then they play Richmond and Footscray, who are 2 other teams in the mix there for those spots in the bottom of the 10. You get the feeling that they're going to have to win for probably all 5 of them to make the finals with their poor percentage. So I think they'll probably miss out now. But above that, Southport and Footscray, for me, remain the 2 most dangerous teams outside the top 10. I think they can both come good. They can both make it. Footscray with an extra game in hand, with a reasonably generous run home. They played all the top teams in the first half of the year. So they're the 2 teams to really watch. I don't think Geelong will make it. I think GWS is a bit flaky, but they can make it. I think Richmond is probably the really vulnerable team out of the top 10, especially after in the top 10 after yesterday's result. They've really opened the door. So I've still got Southport and Footscray coming in. I've got Richmond going out, and one of Carlton or Collingwood. I'm not sure which one at this stage. Possibly Carlton.
Definitely. So that's how we do it. Again, the men still have plenty of games, but let's go to it. Finals footy is always entertaining, and the women's final is set. So I'm looking just at the first round of the finals, and I see basically what I would consider a preliminary final between Collingwood and Port Melbourne, 1v2. and then 3v6, 3v6, 4v5 with Box Hill, Essendon, and Williamstown, Carleton. Now, just quickly help me here, Brandon, because I haven't had a chance to see it. Is this a finals where 1 and 2 play and then they automatically go to a grand final, a preliminary kind of explain how the women are doing this 6-team final?
Okay, so first versus second have a double chance at this stage.
Mhm.
So even if they lose this week, they will get another go. The winner, this is called a qualifying final. The winner will go through to the second semi-final, which is a grand final qualifier, and that is still a double chance game. So assume the higher ranked teams win before we do any tips.
Mhm.
Just to make it easy to explain. Say Collingwood wins, they stay first, they go through to the second semi-final. Port Melbourne drops to the first semi-final, and they would go on a sudden death run for the rest of the final series.
Mhm.
The highest ranked winner of the 2 eliminations, this is where it gets a little bit murky in a top 6.
Mhm.
The highest ranked winner then gains a double chance. So if they lose this week, they're out. But if they win, the highest ranked winner goes into that second semi-final against Collingwood,
Okay.
against the winner of the qualifying final, from which the winner goes through to the grand final.
Gotcha.
The second highest ranked winner out of those other 2 games go through and play the qualifying final loser in the first semi. So again, assuming the higher ranked teams win, that would mean Williamstown would go through to play Collingwood in a double chance game, and Box Hill would then play Port Melbourne in a sudden death game.
Mhm.
From there, the loser of Collingwood and Williamstown would play the winner of Box Hill and Port Melbourne
Gotcha.
for the right to meet the winner of Collingwood and
Collingwood,
Williamstown in
yep.
the grand final. Clear as mud?
It clears my house. It's like, and I thought the men's final was entertaining. At least the one thing I got to give, and this is no disrespect to the VFL, but at least with the waffle and sample, it's pretty simple. 4 teams get in, top 2 teams play. The winner gets to the grand final. Loser plays the winner of the elimination 3-4 matchup. The winner of that one then plays the winner of the first one for the grand final. So
I think they're top
it's
fives actually. Those comps. So,
yeah,
but same
it's always
story.
interesting. But
Yeah,
I love it because it does give a extra oomph to 1 and 2 a little bit, because 2 games and you're in a grand final, where if you lose that first one, I mean, you're potentially playing 3 games to get to a grand final. So a little bit more wear and tear on the leg. So let's go.
yeah. I do believe a top 6. There's no. I've seen 2 different top 6 formats, and I don't think either of them are fair. I don't think there's a way to make a fair top 6 finals format. So I will say I would like to see the VFL either revert to that top 5 that you're talking about, or go to a top 8. Even though there's only 12 teams, having a top 8 rewards the top 4 teams a lot
Mhm.
more. In a top 5, it's 3 that get the double chance.
Mhm.
4 and 5 are in sudden death. This year, you would see in the VFLW, there are 8 very good teams who all deserve their spot in the finals. That's not always the case.
Yeah.
So, but
The way the
that's
cookie
what I do.
crumbles, unfortunately.
I'd probably drop to a top 5 in a 12-team comp.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, because four would be way too small, because you'd only get the
Four's
top
too
4.
few.
Yeah,
I had
and it's
4 a
like
couple of
you
years
don't
ago
mind
in
6, you
the
don't mind
12.
6, but it's I understand half, but it convolutes the finals so much. It's like I was almost thinking, could 1 and 2 get a bye into a preliminary final, have
That is another top 6.
but then
That's actually a
but then
third
it's
top
almost
6 format that they have.
tournament like, so it's still it's a 1 loss and you're done. So at least with the
Exactly
way you've
right.
got it
That's how that
formatted, is
one's not
it
fair.
does kind of give 1 and 2 an extra, they give a little bit of sweetener to it. So I absolutely
Yeah,
love it. It's
the
going to be
third one.
fantastic. I With the 6 teams that you got there, anybody can get to a grand final the way it's going.
Yeah,
It'll be
definitely.
fascinating to see. So we will, in fact, actually, let's just We'll go to the men's, and we'll finish round 16, and then we will go through how you see these finals. I'm not going to make an attempt to try to keep track of that, but I'd be very interested. So we'll just really quickly talk about it. Kind of puts a smile on my face a little bit after the interesting morning is the Sydney Swans get the VFL side get a nice little win over Richmond 88-67. So we'll jump to it to basically here within hours of when we are recording sees Footscray versus Collingwood. Who do you like in this one?
Genuine 8 point game, this one, where the winner is in the top 10 and the loser is probably out. I've really got no idea who I like in this one. It's a real 50-50 game. I've tipped Collingwood to win because their form at the moment is just a little bit better than Footscray's. The
Mhm.
Bulldogs had to fight pretty hard to see off Coburg last week, whereas Collingwood have more AFLW listed players in their team at the moment. They destroyed Frankston, so they'll start favourites in this one. I said about 10 points, but it'll be a very close game and one that I'll be certainly tuning into this afternoon.
Definitely. I think Pies win this one, but I think this one's close. All right. So we have Heritage Bank Stadium up in Queensland as the Gold Coast Suns host the Frankston Dolphins. The Suns win. I think the Suns win big, unfortunately.
Yeah, unfortunately, big signing for Frankston during the week. They picked up former St Kilda and Carlton AFL player
I
Jack
saw that.
Nunes, who retired at the end of last season. He's only played one game of football at the end at any level this year in the Northern League for a club called Greensborough. He hasn't played football for a couple of months, so he may be a little bit underdone. But if he is fit and ready to go, he'll really improve things for the Dolphins. But no, the Suns on the rebound are going to win easily.
Yeah, definitely, unfortunately. So, and the Northern Bull Ants at Genus Street Oval in Victoria host the Brisbane Lions. As much as I'd love to see the Bull Ants find a way to really throw a wrench into the Lions season, I think the Lions just too good for this one.
Yeah, once again, the Lions have been a little bit flat the last couple of weeks. They've got 3 or 4 really important players back into their team this week. Unfortunately for the Bull Ants, they'll be having a pretty big win as well.
And I think Daniel Rich might actually be playing in that game against the Bull Ants as well, which is interesting to see Richie jump down and maybe get a run in Victoria. At least I've seen
His
some
first
potential
game,
rumors.
his first VFL game, and his first game at reserves level since 2011. Would you believe?
That's crazy, crazy to think. All right, Giant Stadium up in New South Wales as the GWS Giants take on the Box Hill Hawks. Who do you like in this one?
Much more dangerous at home than they are away, the Giants. They are very much capable of winning this game. I think the Hawks are playing some really good footy at the moment and fully deserve to start favourites. I'm still waiting for the selected teams to come through on this one. I'm going to tip the Hawks, but certainly wouldn't surprise me if GWS resurrected their season after such a shocker against Casey last week.
Yeah, it'd be nice. I'd love to see GWS win that one again at home. Maybe who knows? Maybe maybe some home cooking. So, all right, Piranha Park in Victoria as the Coburg Lions host Carlton. I want to see the Lions win this. I want to tip for the underdog, but I think Carlton just a little bit too good. As much as I'd love to tip the Lions, I think Carlton is going to get this one. But I hope the Lions are competitive in this one.
Yeah, the Blues had a big win over the Bull Ants last week, which got them some good confidence. Coburg, as I said, they've been in front at 3/4 time. 2 of the past 3, they were in front just before halftime last week. This is one that they can win. I'm not going to say they will. I'm going to tip Carlton by probably by about that 5 goal margin again. But Carlton has never actually won a game at Coburg's home ground. They've had 3 goes at it and they've been beaten on all occasions. And on all occasions, Coburg was the lower ranked team.
Mhm.
So if there's an upset to be sniffed, this is the one. But Carlton is a clear favourite.
I'll cross my fingers on that one. Like I said, love to see the Lions get a win. So Port of Melbourne at ETU Stadium in Victoria hosting Werribee. Again, Werribee, one of the informed teams in the comp. I think Werribee's going to win this one, but I think Port will challenge them a little bit.
Yeah, agreed. This one's exactly the same. Port very dangerous at home. Werribee doesn't have a good record on this ground, having not won there, as I mentioned earlier, for 8 years. Um, Last year, in fact, Werribee went to Port Melbourne as unbackable favourites and had 0 goals on the board at half time, which was the first time that had happened to them since 1966. They came back and only lost that game by 3 points. I think they'll be hungry to not let that happen again, and they'll roll on their merry way, but not without a few nervous moments from Port.
Definitely. So, in a mouth-watering one, followed up as Williamstown host Southport. If this game was in Queensland, I'd lean a little bit more towards the Sharkies, but I'm going to tip the Seagulls in this one. At home, Southport's form not as good. I like the Seagulls in this one.
Most intriguing game of the round, this one, no question about it. Um, yeah, Southport has never played at Williamstown, and it's likely to be cold. It's likely to be windy. It's going to be tough for them. Williamstown have been very flat, very ordinary in their past 2 games. If they play like that again, Southport will beat them. But I don't think that will happen. I think Williamstown, they're due. They're too good a team to play 3 bad ones in a row, and I think they'll make. I think they'll get the job done and leave Southport needing to really ramp up that run if they want to tip Carlton or Collingwood out of the top 10 come the final. So Williamstown for me, but as you said, only because it's at home.
Yeah, very another interesting one. As Sandringham and Trevor Barker Beach Oval in Victoria take on Casey Demons. I think Casey's starting to find their run. Who do you like in this one?
And my favourite player in the competition is Jimmy Munro from the Casey Demons, who plays his 150th game this weekend, joining Tom Wilson for Collingwood 2 weeks ago, and Ben Jolly, who played his 300th, who we mentioned earlier. He actually started his career with Sandringham, so it's absolutely terrific that he gets to reach the milestone against the Zebras. The 2 clubs he's played for will both celebrate what's been a wonderful achievement. Sandringham got that draw against Brisbane Lions a couple of weeks ago on this ground, so they will go in with a little bit of confidence. But Casey is just cranking up the engine, and I think they'll be too good.
Yeah, and then another fun one is GMHBA Stadium in Victoria hosts Geelong v North Melbourne. Who do you like in this one?
Yeah, I'm heading down to the Cattery on Sunday night, 5:35 on Sunday night. It's an interesting time, almost as interesting a starting time as 2:05 on a Thursday afternoon was for Richmond and Sydney.
Mm-hmm.
North Melbourne is flying at the moment. They've won 5 games in a row. They are. I couldn't see them being in better form, and I think they'll go down there and beat Geelong and beat them pretty well.
All righty, so we'll jump to the women's, and this will be fascinating. We're going to try to go through all of this very, very quickly. But again, as we said, a mouth-watering finals. We'll start off first game, one of the eliminations as the Box Hill Hawks take on the Essendon Bombers. Who moves on and who goes home?
These are the 2 teams who I've been telling you all year I reckon are the best 2 in the competition. And for one reason or another, one of them is going out in the first week of the finals. So that's what makes this so intriguing to see what's going to happen. If Box Hill can kick straight, I think they'll win. But I'm not confident that they can kick straight. There's too big a list of games that they've thrown away through not being able to kick straight. The reigning premiers just doing enough at the moment. They're not in the best of form. They only just beat the Bulldogs last week. They only just beat Casey the week before. I think they're due to have a good one. So I'm going for Essendon to win by probably around about a goal or just under.
All righty, so we jump to 1v2 Victoria Bark in Victoria as Collingwood host Port Melbourne. Who jumps to one of the preliminary finals?
Well, Port Melbourne back in round 2 actually beat Collingwood easily, 57-20 way back then. So they'll take plenty of confidence into that. There's so much that's happened since then. This is only Port's 2nd ever final. They played an elimination final and lost it in 2021 in their first year. Collingwood, on the other hand, won the flag in 2019. They were favourites heading into the grand final in 2021 before that season was called off. They dropped down the ladder last year. They've bounced back. This is the teams that finished 6th and 10th on the ladder last year have finished 1st and 2nd. I'm going for Collingwood to win the game at home. Again, only by a goal, maybe a touch more. But yeah, I think their finals experience might prove just a little bit too much for Port.
Yeah, and then the last of elimination final sees Williamstown DSV Stadium versus Carlton. Can the Gulls knock out the Blues, or can the Blues continue with another upset and sending the Seagulls home?
Well, where I said Box Hill and Essendon were the two best and most likely teams in the competition all year, these are the two unlikely ones. Williamstown and Carlton, both of them are playing in their first ever final in the VFLW competition. And well, Williamstown have won 9 out of their past 11 games. What makes that amazing, Donny? Before they went on that run, so when they were 0-3 at the start of this year, their record in their history was 9 wins, 47 losses, and 2 draws. So since that point, they have doubled the win tally in their club's history. How is that? I know it's not a long history, but they are on fire. And 2 of those 9 wins came by 35 points and 38 points against Carlton, which is why I make the Seagulls favourites. The Blues have had a couple of easy kills in the last 2 weeks against the bottom 2 teams. That will either mean they're fresh and firing and ready to go, or maybe just a little bit rusty when the heat comes from Williamstown. So I'm going to go for the Seagulls, who have been battle hardened and been playing elimination finals for about the last 8 weeks. I think Williamstown's going to go on.
All right, so we move from there to as you said, kind of as clear as mud. So this would leave what matchups for the next round?
That would have Collingwood playing Williamstown in the second semi-final, with the winner going into the grand final. And the other semi-final would be would be Port Melbourne versus Essendon.
Gotcha.
With the loser of that would then go out, and the winner would play the loser of Collingwood and Williamstown for the second grand final spot.
Alrighty, so we'll go all the way through the finals real quick. Williamstown, Collingwood. If that's the matchup, who do you see getting to the grand final?
I think Collingwood would probably be favourites again at Victoria Park. There, they beat Williamstown in a low-scoring game early in the year on that ground. I think they've got the ability to shut down Williamstown's scoring a little bit better. So I'd back Collingwood there. And Port Melbourne beat Essendon by 3 points a couple of weeks ago. A lot of this depends on how many AFLW players Essendon release. The answer is going to be none, because the AFLW season starts at the end of September. So it's at the end of August, sorry. So it's not that far away. Very hard call. I would probably just lean still towards Essendon's experience and think the Bombers can keep going.
All right, so that would leave Essendon and Williamstown playing in the other matchup to get to Collingwood in the grand final. Who would Collingwood face in the grand final if it was Essendon v Williamstown in the other preliminary final?
And once again, I'm actually going to stick with Essendon. They were the best team in the competition last year. They were undefeated for the whole year. They've been a little bit up and down this year. I think they can get on a roll. So I've got them actually going all the way to the grand final. Not with a hell of a lot of confidence, of course, because any of Box Hill, Port Melbourne, or Williamstown could tip them out if that's the way things go, the way the games fall. But yeah, I'm thinking a Collingwood Essendon grand final at North Port Oval in front of about 8,000 people.
All right, and who do you think will be raising the flag after that game?
Collingwood. I think they're the team to beat right now. I think they're the team to beat, and I think if Essendon comes through those three tough finals, and Collingwood's had had a week off to prepare for it. That would set them in good stead.
Awesome, awesome. That is gonna do it. So much there, as you said, about as clear as mud. But I think I agree with you. Just looking at some of these matchups, I think this women's final is going to be absolutely fantastic. I'm definitely going to try to watch a couple of these games because this has been scintillating footy. I cannot wait for it. So that is going to do it, Brandon. Again, an absolutely fantastic, fantastic chat with VFL. I know there's a lot to talk with so many teams. I truly, truly appreciate you after we kind of had some scheduling situations, but I always appreciate sitting down and having a chat.
Yeah, it's been fantastic. It's always great to bring the great game to the world, and yeah, hope you've all enjoyed it, and hope you enjoy the next month of football, especially at VFLW level, because it's certainly one to keep an eye on, because you just don't know who's going to win at any point in time.
Yeah, it'll definitely be fantastic. Keep an eye on it. So, ladies and gentlemen, that is going to do it for another episode of Donnie's Disposals, a VFL Vantage. We will be back with more coverage, VFL, Waffle, Sandful, and obviously AFL and AFLW. So that's going to do it for our episode. We'll be back with another episode of Donnie's Disposals very, very soon.